Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar, you're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression, because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash. Yeah.
Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you. That was...
Hello, everybody. This is Tyler Yankee, Libertarian Podcast Review, episode 146. It's kind of a special one, and I'll talk to you about why I'm doing it and kind of what the impetus was behind it. But I'm glad some people are joining already. Look, Texas and the federal government are squaring off, and with that, there's some the boomers on the right, and I call everyone on the right boomers, whether they're boomer cons or not, by the way. And someone yelled at me because I called Ben Shapiro, Tom McDonald's his cringe-worthy rap boomer con stuff, and they're like, they're not boomers, and I'm like, oh, what a boomer response, by the way. It's that attitude though of okay. With that in mind, there's a lot of takes on this thing, or maybe my perception was wrong to begin with as well. And so I thought I would give you kind of an understanding, just the filings that are out there and whatnot. By the way, I'm going to add this here. Okay. So this was this is a video I did.
Propaganda of the regime, which
Dave
is actually
Smith,
not that hard to do because it's all based
Scott
on,
Horton had a
ridiculous
Spaces, and I
bullshit.
joined in.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to
people-
play it because by the way, sometimes it bothers me to play some of those things. I do like that. Okay, which you guys are like, I watch you live. Okay, well, that's cringeworthy to me as well. So anyway, welcome everybody here. Loads of Honey said, sup, Mosley and Ellen and Mosley said, you still doing a show? Yeah, we're doing one here. It wasn't planned. I just decided to do it real quick. And Alan, by the way, I know you're associated with the 10th Amendment Center. I would encourage everyone to go out there because Michael Bolton's been putting on some really good videos lately, the last few days about this kind of stuff. And he goes into it in a much different kind of way. Nullification, about supremacy clause, and there's all of that. But what I'm going to talk to you about here, we're going to go over the pleadings, and I'm going to give you a quick understanding of what I think. Oops, hang on, this is playing on my ears here. Where it's at, why we're in this situation, and kind of and by the way, I think Texas, if open borders libertarians aren't in full favor of this, they are. And by the way, let's go to reason.com. I think they've done one article on it, one simple article. Now there's another one. Politics created a border crisis. That's actually for I think their podcast. I'll have to listen to that today to see exactly what they said. But before this, I think there was one article here. Let's see if I can find it again. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? It's further down. Now we don't even see it. Crackdowns. Okay. In the Volokh conspiracy, which is their legal base, it's kind of a blog that goes with that. They haven't even written anything about this, but their issue with the thing at the border was, what was it? I need to find it because it's actually really important. Actually, I may actually have it here. I sent myself an email on some issues. Patriot Act, the SCOTUS blog, filings. No, it's not there. But their take on the border was stupid. And I say that because it's literally filed specifically to give a boner to to libertarians. So with that in mind, let's take a look back here, kind of what the battle is, where we've gone. I've got notes everywhere, so I don't know if I'll even be able to do this in a comprehensive way, but I'll just go. I'm doing a Substack on it because Scott Horton, when I did a Spaces, he's like, hey, did you write anything about this? You know, in my mind, not thinking, I'm like, no, I might do a show about it. Thinking Scott's probably like, I'd like to post something out on the Libertarian Institute of what you just said. So I start drafting it, and then I'm like, I'm not getting paid for this. Who's paying me my hundreds of dollars an hour, multiple to do this? No one. So I did stop, but I did write a bunch up. So maybe I'll start there. Okay. So we'll start here with the initial issue, which is Texas filed a suit against the Department of Homeland Security on October 24, 2023, with the 5th District Court, that's federal court. Through briefings and arguments, the court made some findings regarding illegal immigration as follows. So I think that's important because we'll get to the fact of that's your inner J talking. I don't have it. I have zero inner J or outer J. I like to have value for value, as Steve Poikonen said here. The number of border. Okay, so this is the findings that they made. So we'll talk first about what is the issue at the border. Everybody knows what it is, but it's important here because the court made some findings specific to how bad it was at the border. The number of border crossings into Texas at unauthorized places has exploded. The number of border patrol encounters with migrants illegally entering the country has swelled from a comparably paltry 458,000 in 2020 to 1.7 million in 2021 and 2.4 million in 2022, with Border Patrol, quote, on track to meet or exceed those numbers in 2024. I think I didn't put a 4 there, but that's what it is. Okay, and I have sightings for all this here. Unfortunately, it goes on. Organized criminal organizations take advantage of these large numbers, and conveying all these people to the doorstep of the United States has become an incredibly lucrative enterprise for the major Mexican drug cartels. Indeed, trafficking across the southern border has metastasized from a scattered network of freelance coyotes, that's my attempt to get my Spanish in there, to a multi-billion-dollar international business controlled by organized crime, including some of Mexico's most violent drug cartels. Miriam Jorgen, smuggling migrants at the border, now a billion-dollar business. New York Times, July 25, 2022, and they quote that, and they actually have that in their filings. The state of Texas does. These cartels, which have increasingly acquired a transitional dimension, are now the 5th largest employer in Mexico. Rafael Prieto Curiel et al. Reducing cartel recruitment is the only way to lower violence in Mexico. It's a science review. It gives it that as well. The reference. And the infrastructure built by the cartels for human cargo can also be used to ship illegal substances, namely fentanyl, lethal in small doses. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death in young Americans. It is frequently encountered in vast quantities at the border. Okay, so there's some findings that the court actually made, and we'll get to exactly what the court filing is about, because that to me is very important in how this thing came up. This thing being the case up and then got to the Supreme Court. We'll walk through that timeline. But however, per the state Texas filings themselves, border towns like Eagle Pass are at the epicenter of the crisis that was actually findings that the court said, yes, this is undocumented people are coming across in large numbers. According to Eagle Pass Mayor Rolando Salinas Jr., the recent surge of border crossings is like, quote, nothing that we've ever seen ever. To have so many people crossing in without a consequence, okay? And they give the resource to the transcript there as well. After roughly 14,000 people, about half of Eagle Pass's population entered the city in less than 2 weeks. Mayor Salinas declared a state of disaster with the court filings. We will get into it. Okay. The facts are clear that traffic on the Texas border, specifically the Eagle Pass, are being flooded with migrants crossing into Texas in numbers never seen before. That's me. So this is the status. This is what we have. Everyone knows this. By the way, I want to look this back up because I have this friend. He's a good, and when I say good, I mean this, a liberal or Democrat. I think he's middle of the road Democrat. He lives back in Washington, D.C. Lived in France for quite a while with his family. And we have a lot of good discussions on politics. When in my cycling podcast, I've had him on there multiple times, kind of talking France tour and some politics stuff in well. Very interesting. Now, he had put when there was some border issue data that came out right when Biden took office. And with that in mind, he posted on Facebook, and I want to go back and see this. And he's like, look, these are just, it's kind of like new president takes office and gas prices. You like, look, it's a lagging indicator. You can't take this into account what it is now. And so he's like, we'll look at this later. And it's just going to be lagging numbers. Things go up and down. I'd like to go back, find that, and then bring it to his attention because the border is definitely now. Is it all about the president? this is where what's interesting about the filings, which is what is the premise? What are the laws that they are using to put forth, they being the federal government or even the state of Texas trying to defend themselves, but even especially the federal government for trying to have justification for what they're doing. A lot of the justification that what they're doing is the Patriot Act, okay? So you have all these different laws, different codified statutes that are in there, and Congress really does have a lot of power. This is what I posed to Dave Smith and Scott Horton at the time when I broke this out, and I'm like, now, you're going to have, because it's, and we'll talk about this in here about what the court has actually said, what the federal government has been doing. But when you break it all down, is Trump going, let's say Trump's elected, is he going to do anything different? Or is he going to maybe enforce it on his side? But like everything else, they don't change the backbone of the laws in place, which means the next administration just comes in and runs roughshod over it. Now, I don't know why I thought of this, but Benjamin Owen's been going off on everybody lately, and I just would listen to a podcast with him. I couldn't listen to the Josh Smith one. It was, I started to, and I didn't. Then I was like, oh, I saw he was on Bob, he being Owen Benjamin was on Bob Murphy. So I listened to that yesterday, and that was really frustrating for a few reasons. And it kind of ties into the mindset of some of this, like your guy's going to come in and he's just going to make changes. Owen wants to make changes, so he wants it more strict. The problem is, at least I feel this way with Pete Quinones, wants the same thing too. At least Pete Quinones is saying, I want a right-wing dictator. Now, the question is, do you get there? And Benjamin Owen just wants you to be under the foot and the boot of someone, hoping, assuming it's going to be the right person. It was a little bizarre, but I digress. Let's see what some people have to say here. JC says, Art Acevedo is back in Austin. I trust the leadership of Texas with people like him and wheels at the helm. Okay. Andy is trying to get Stephen Kinsella to debate Owen. Yeah, so part of the problem with the Owen, and I encourage everyone to listen to the Bob Murphy one. It's not a debate. It's a discussion. And Bob doesn't debate him. Bob does push back on some things. The problem is Owen talks. And then Bob's like, ooh, lot to break down there. So let's start with this. And he starts in saying a sentence, and Owen interrupts him and then goes off on a tangent. And it can never get accomplished because Owen he might be more autistic and ADHD ridden than Toad. I think he's super smart. I just, there were so many, and I'm sorry to diverge here, but I clipped out a part, and maybe I should get it real quick, which is he rips Bob for being friends with Michael Malice specifically. He says Michael Malice likes anarchism, and he's also friends with a Tran. And if you are friends with him or you promote him, you are then pushing this whole concept. Now, later on, Bob kind of talks to him and says, look, you're everything you're talking about, all these conspiracies are the bad part of the federal government. So you don't see a problem with you wanting more federal government, but yet all these problems that you have are the federal government. And he's like, no, the federal government's bad, but there's some things. And I'm like, it's the same idea then, right? I mean, you're pushing, at least Michael Malice is a single person and he's not trying to steal your money. Anyway, it was, there's a lot of dichotomies there. Why am I so bad here at focusing? Let's see what else. JC says, I was being sarcastic about trusting the leadership, by the way. Okay. I don't know that. Is there an emoji you could do for sarcasm? All right. So Texas Governor, was it Greg Abbott? Abbott and Costello. I think he's a long lost relative. He then initiates this thing called Operation Lone Star. Lone Star, I am your father. That's Spaceballs. Okay. Lone Star, which is launched Operation Lone Star in 2021 to aid Border Patrol and its core functions. The filings go on to expound that as part of the multi-front initiative, the governor authorized the Texas Military Department, we'll call them the TMD from here on, to deploy C-wire fencing on Texas's own property and with the permission of landowners at hotspots like Eagle Pass. The district court explained, quote, the wires serve as a deterrent, an effective one at that. In fact, to go on, quoting it, the wire was so successful that illegal border crossing dropped to less than a third of their previous levels. An important factor to know, as the district court found, was that, quote, state agents have given concertina wire to federal agents to assist them in deploying wire fencing, and federal agents have given concertina wire to state agents to assist them in doing the same. So it's all a back and forth cohesive thing. By all accounts, Border Patrol is grateful for the assistance of Texas law enforcement, and the evidence shows the parties work cooperatively across the state, including the El Paso and the Rio Grande Valley. So Operation Lone Star was a success, putting up these wires. The Border Patrol, it's Customs and Border Patrol, CBP or whatever, they were happy about it. The Texas officials, agents, they were happy about it. Everyone was good and dandy with this coercive process. All was going well, as I continue on in my article here. Operation Lone Star until September of 2023, when Border Patrol began cutting the C-wire fencing put in place themselves and by Texas TMD. TMD recorded and documented over 20 instances from September 20 to October 10, 2023, where Customs and Border Protection CBP officials were seen cutting Texas fencing. This prompted Texas to file suit in October 24 in an attempt to have the standoff in court rather than the border area of Texas. This is as I'm writing. I'm just reading my stuff here. Texas versus Department of Homeland Security. Now we're getting into it. The filings. And so what my presumption was when I saw this thing was going to court, it reminds me of what Arizona v. Fed Homeland Security back in 2012, 2014, something like that, where they were saying, hey, the Obama administration isn't doing their job. So they filed suit to basically try to force, or they were doing immigration service basically themselves in deporting people and stuff. Federal government, the SCOTUS came in and said, no, you can't do that. There's preemption. Preemption being that if there's two laws, federal government has the same law as state government, the federal government law preempts the state. Now, there's certain instances where the state can mirror that and maybe be more restrictive or less restrictive, depending on what the law is asking to do. Okay, that's EPA is a fine example. There's federal laws on that. They say you have to do X, Y, and Z. The state, California, as an example, could be more restrictive than the federal government, and they're fine with that. Even though there's preemption there, the state law is the same, but more restrictive, and in that case, it's valid. So anyway, there's preemption that falls into place here, and that's was my understanding or thought of it, which was, okay, the feds are going to win because they're always going to win on the supremacy clause, the preemption issue, especially with the immigration that's kind of based on there. There's some different facts. And then I started looking, and then SCOTUS kicks it out, and you're like, yeah, that's the way it is. And then I started seeing a lot of, freaking out from the right, freaking out from the left, like babies in cages. And then the right's like, rule of law is not being followed, or we're going to violate this now. And Texas Governor Abbott is just going to go and start putting up fences in violation of the SCOTUS ruling. Is that really what happened? Spoiler, no. And we'll get to that. So October 24, Texas files a lawsuit. Okay. To most, and this is what I was saying here, when the filings and claims of action by the state of Texas are not what you might have heard. To most, I'd suspect, the common conception of legal dispute is one of the following, okay? 1, Texas is demanding that the feds enforce the border or, that's what I thought it was, or 2, Texas is requesting that the feds aren't doing anything and then the state should be allowed to enforce the border. In a roundabout way, item number 2 is the answer, but only by default, and it's not really to that extent. The state of Texas in their filing is actually requesting relief for damage made to private property by the feds. Specifically, the claims are for conversion and trespass. Then they have 2 other causes of action here, APA violations and ultra vires conduct, and we'll get to those. But the 2 main that went up to the Supreme Court, and we'll talk about how that got there, starting with conversion. Okay, so what is conversion? It's exactly what it might sound as converting something. Okay, is that it? Yeah. Texas law furnishes a cause of action for conversion for, quote, the unlawful and wrongful exercise of dominion, ownership, or control of one person over the property of another to the exclusion of the same rights by the owner. Okay, and there's some case, Pan Am Petroleum Corp v. Long. Basic idea is you're taking some property that belongs to someone else and you're converting it to your own. You're repossessing it without claim of title. And this has to do with what they call chattel, which is some sort of property. Okay. The other one is trespass. Trespass to chattels for exercising under Texas for exercising dominion over the property of another in a way that causes, quote, actual damage or, quote, deprives the owner of its use for a substantial period of time. Okay. So here's where I got on with Dave and Scott and said, these are, and you look through the filings, and we'll talk about a little bit of that, which is the court themselves talks about property rights. So there is a vast area there in this Eagle Pass where the state of Texas has its own property or people's private property, and with their permission, they erected these C-wire barriers. Okay, so it's on Texas land, it's not on federal land, and they erected these barriers. And the what happens is when we said Operation Lone Star became a problem, the government actually came in, the feds, the Department of Homeland Security, just started smashing these fences. They were ruining them, personal property, private property, whatever, and that's what. Okay, these APA violations. APA, I'm trying to remember what it stands for, but it's just violations of one of these protection acts. The ultra vires conduct is Latin for beyond its powers. Basically, the state is conduct itself is going beyond the powers. Okay, so as you can see by the claims of Texas against the feds, Texas is being very specific in their motion, and they're not taking overbroad positions that Department of Homeland Security via Border Patrol is not doing their job. Instead, Texas are taking a sniper shot to the feds by showing the feds they are removing and destroying C-wire and trespassing. Now, the APA violations and the ultra vires claims do go towards the issues of the feds and their specific roles, but the main claim that got traction and the restraining orders were the destruction of property and trespass. Okay, let's go through the court timeline real quick here. As described, Texas filed their case against the Department, we'll call them DHLS, on October 24. And this was proceeding through the court with briefings, arguments on both sides. As we've discussed, the district court made factual findings for Texas, very, very forthright on that. However, during this process, Border Patrol was continuing to destroy property and actually flattened a fence. This is part of the problem. They flattened a fence and they escorted illegals across the border through an opening they had just created. Okay. When that happened, Texas applied for a TRO, temporary restraining order, to stop the feds from that action. So now that starts on October 24th. Now on the 30th, the district court issued a TRO, temporary restraining order, ruling concluding that Texas will likely prevail on its trespass to chattel's claim that ongoing interference with the state's proprietary interests will cause irreparable harm, and that the equitable balance favored the state. In other words, so the temporary restraining order is, once again, temporary, and the court's like, look, if there's irreparable harm going to be done if I don't do something to the party that's filing the application, then we have to do something. And are they likely to succeed? Are on the merits? And if so, if there's they call balance of the harms, or equitable balance, and then is there irreparable harm, and if so, they'll enjoin the other party. The TRO specifically enjoined defendants, the DHLS, from destroying Texas fencing in the vicinity of Eagle Pass, but they carved out an exception. And this is very important because when you see the arguments made to the Supreme Court, this is part of the arguments that the feds make the entire time. What was the exception? Texas did not oppose this, by the way. It was for providing and obtaining emergency medical aid. So, Texas comes in and they're like, look, they're destroying our property. You got to make them stop. So you get a restraining order, and the government's like, perfectly fine, but we're going to carve out this exception, which is going to be if they need to go in there and provide aid, they're going to do it. And Texas is like, yeah, that's not a problem. We just stop fucking taking our fence down and destroying property. Okay. Now on November 7th, testimony from the defendants, the DHLS and Border Patrol, revealed that agents cutting the fence was not precipitated by a medical exigency. So they were just cutting the fence. There was no medical issue that they had to get in there for, yet they were cutting the fence regardless. The TRO was first ordered, and then the party, this is so bizarre to me when you think of some of these things that happened, which is the court's not just ordering this. Now the parties are agreeing to this temporary restraining order because they first was ordered, and then the parties, for whatever reason, they got together and they agreed by stipulation to extend this TRO out till November 29, with additional briefings to be submitted before that hearing. The problem is the feds then make an application up to the district court. On 11/29, the district court they agreed to this point. They come in, then so maybe I wasn't quite right about the agreement being an issue, but they made an agreement. They come back on 11/29. The district court then made extensive filings supporting Texas. These are some of the highlights of this. Now, maybe I'll save the kind of little bit of okay, we'll just get into some of the findings. Texas has, quote, direct proprietary interests in its property. Okay. Defendants conceded destruction, that's the feds, destruction of property, and it can't be justified based on, quote, statutory duties they are obvious. They're so obviously derelict in enforcing. So there's statutes that they're supposed to actually be, gives them the obligation to go and enforce certain things, and they're destroying this property. There's not a connection between the destruction of property and these duties that they're doing. Yes, Minder, this is live. Sorry, I was gonna record it, and then I thought of Minder. I was gonna record it and then put it out as a live show, because it's the best way to kind of do it through, especially to Rumble. And then I thought, what would Minder would be confused, and we can't have that. Let's go up here. JC said, people like Owen equate private sector to corporatism and don't see how the state intervention props up corporatism. Then they try to implicate the corporatism of the fault of the free market. He does actually worse than that, because he understands it. He just doesn't, I don't know. It's weird. Dean made an interesting take on the End Times Continue podcast. He said Texas shouldn't have made it about an invasion, but a takings issue because between Texas and the federal government. JC, I don't know who Dean is, but he's correct. He's not correct. The invasion portion was made by Abbott post. Okay, so I know Dean. Okay, Ace and Dean. I don't know if he read the pleadings. Maybe I'll have to go listen to that and then take him on for this, because the invasion stuff is a public relations comment. They're talking about an invasion, and if there's an invasion, then you can have the other states come and help you and whatnot. That's the reason I'm doing this podcast. Thank you for that comment. It's not. There's nothing in here that talks about an invasion. What did we say? Does destruction of property get in a restraining order for trespass? Does that have to do with an invasion? No, that's a personal private property issue. What's the other one? A conversion. Does that have anything to do with an invasion? No. It says it's against the federal government for these specific acts. Okay. And that is important here. And that's why I think Texas eventually is going to win on the border in court. And actually there's filings due tomorrow on that, and then arguments on February 7. But I don't think, and I'll be interested to hear what happens with them in federal court. Okay. Let's keep going here. This is what the court found. Defendants conceded destruction of the property, and that destruction of that couldn't be based on statutory duties that they are, this is how the court wrote it, obviously derelict in enforcing. That's kind of brutal. The defendants utterly ignore injunctive relief, and so the appropriate remedy is this. Therefore, irreparable harm has been done to Texas. That's interesting too. Border agents already had access to both sides of the fence, okay? Both sides. And therefore, no need to destroy the fence. Also, as noted, carved out was created. No objection by Texas to allow access for medical emergencies if required. And lastly, the district court also noted the defendants, this is in their filings, the federal court said, cynical arguments and disingenuousness in arguing the wire hinders Border Patrol from performing its job, while also asserting the wire helps. The court further made credibility findings about testifying federal agents, documenting their, quote, totally uncorroborated assertions and evasive answers and demeanor. There you go. Okay, so that's what the federal court said. Now, they did a temporary restraining order based on the chattels, trespass to chattels, and conversion, but not on the two other issues. And what was the argument that was made at the time? Now, Texas did not win a preliminary injunction in the federal court, so they appealed it to a five-judge, the motions panel in Texas there to make a decision on this TRO. The motions panel, by the way, they didn't grant a preliminary injunction, but they did do the TRO. It's like preliminary injunction is basically a temporary restraining order, but it can go on indefinite. But they said, look, we've got hearings upcoming. With that in mind, that's when this Department of Homeland Security filed up to SCOTUS to have that TRO, the temporary restraining order, remanded or vacated. Okay. And that's when you saw a ruling from SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. And all they basically said is like 2 or 3 sentences there. We are vacating the TRO. Okay. So with the TRO vacated, what does that mean? All it means is the feds could come in here and they can still destroy property, but it didn't say Texas couldn't continue to do what they were doing, which was putting up fencing. And by the way, from the first TRO until it got up to SCOTUS, which were, January here, and this is back in November, they were putting up a lot of fencing. The word is on the street that they're not going to really be able to take it down, all the fencing that they had. Okay. So what were some of those arguments that were based on why? First of all, the first temporary restraining order that the feds put in place, I'm trying to remember, they didn't do the preliminary injunction, and that's why it was appealed. They said, I think I actually have here. That's SCOTUS review. Let's go back here because I got a lot of notes. Okay. The court did not turn the TRO into a preliminary injunction because congressional waivers to sovereign immunity in 5 U.S.C. Section 702 does not apply to such states. State law causes of action. Okay. Sovereign immunity is what the court is, Texas is saying they've waived that under this provision here. And it's under certain state laws that it doesn't actually apply. Anyway, they said, and by the way, this is the argument that the Department of Homeland Security actually makes in this case, which is, you've heard about the supremacy clause. They said, actually, it doesn't apply here. We understand that, but what does apply is sovereign immunity. So the court decided that, and then they went up to the panel, and the panel actually said, well, that the district court legally erred with respect to sovereign immunity, but agreed that Texas has otherwise satisfied the factors under Necken v. Holder as a case. And anyway, so they appealed. The defendants are enjoined during pendency of this appeal from damaging, destroying, or otherwise interfering with the Texas's C-wire fence in the vicinity of Eagle Pass, Texas, as indicated in Texas complaint. Then they made that exception once again for the emergency help. And they said briefs are due on tomorrow, the 30th of January, with oral arguments coming on February 7th. So it will be interesting because that is now going to be the case. Okay, so now it goes on up to the Supreme Court. The defendants argued, they can't credibly argue that there is a conflict with this court's precedent construing the scope of waiver of sovereign immunity in 5 U.S.C. 702 based on the possibility of obtaining damages for past harm, and defendant court found other statutes inadequate to redress harm. Supremacy clause. Supremacy clause does not insulate, this is what Texas is arguing to the Supreme Court, does not insulate defendant's destruction of property, especially given the defendant's the district court's findings that defendant cannot claim the statutory duties that are so obviously derelict in enforcing, which we talked about before. They request the destruction of plaintiff's property. District court finding renders defense asserted conflict with the INA illusory. And then HLS argued intergovernmental immunity allows them to destroy property of Texas or anyone within 25 miles of the border. So let's talk about that real quick. There is a statute out there about being able to come within 25 miles of the border that the jurisdiction of Homeland Security and the Border Patrol can do so. However, with that, sovereign immunity, courts held that this broad general waiver applies to state law claims, which we already talked about. I want to read this about intergovernmental, where are we at here with the 25 miles portion? I think this is the federal statute. This federal statute authorized federal agents acting without a warrant. Okay, this is the 25 miles thing. This is very significant. 8 U.S.C. Section 1357A3 authorizes federal agents acting without a warrant within a distance of 25 miles from the border to have access to private lands, but not dwellings, for the purpose of patrolling the border to prevent illegal entry of aliens into the USA. Okay, so that's part of the issue what's interesting is we've talked about there's sovereign immunity, and then there is the supremacy clause. Now, the 25 miles, if you look at that specifically, you can see the Border Patrol can do these things. They can go down to the border. They can access your property. They can get you out of your car. But their goal has to be to prevent, as it says here, the code is very specific, the purpose of patrolling the border to prevent illegal entry of aliens into the U.S. What we saw was they were ripping down the fence, and they were actually coming and bringing the illegal aliens across the border, ferreting them, helping them across. That's exactly against what the statute allows them to do, and that's part of what Texas is doing here. Now, supremacy clause. I would encourage you to go hear Michael Bolton's thing with the 10th Amendment Center on that. It does not allow it to destroy private property, which we've just kind of talked about with that other else. It's used in SCOTUS, but not with district courts. No reliance on preemption of the supremacy clause in the argument. The Department of Homeland Security actually said, and let's see if I can find it here, what they said about the supremacy clause. They basically waived it. I don't remember where I have it in here, but in their arguments, they said, look, supremacy clause really isn't an issue with this case. It's sovereign immunity. That's where it's all at. And then the court's like, yeah, okay, well, could be. You're right, but sovereign immunity was still not going to work. You've waived it. So with state claims, so we're good to go. Then they go to the Supreme Court and they argue supremacy clause. And the Supreme Court gets all giddy because now it's the federal government to do that. No, so what Michael Bolton was saying today is like, what do you have it in these cases? Supremacy clause only about enforcing legally constitutional laws. So if a court, how do you nullify this? Do you go to the Supreme Court and you beg for them to nullify the federal government? And if it's a federal court doing this, that's tough to do. So he's like, well, you do it through the states of just kind of like not paying attention. So we are coming to a head in a sense here. A lot of the laws, like I said, that were really pushed here by the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland, where the Patriot Act, remember Patriot Act got passed, but this is kind of what I asked Dave. You got the Patriot Act passed by Congress, a Republican government. Now it's being used against them. Are they going to do anything about that? That I don't even really know. Okay, this guy got some more comments here. Obi has been incredibly cringe. Oh, Benjamin, gotcha. He loves conflict though, so it's right up his alley to yell at each other. Yes. JC said, Owen craves attention, even if he has to push flat earth. Yes. Briefs are due tomorrow with oral arguments on my DMs to Andy. Right. Okay. So that's kind of the breakdown there. So what am I getting at here? I don't think supremacy clause, I don't think preemption are working here. By the way, like I said, the invasion, let's go up here to, I'm going to go to the pleadings. Matter of fact, I'm going to take the pleading. I think this is let's get the biggest one, because there we go. That might not be it. When the feds filed their application to the Supreme Court, they included I think they included all the filings. So it's like 80 some pages here. Okay, 96 pages. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to get a nice little Control F, and I'm going to do the word invasion. Zero mentions in the pleadings of invasion. Dean, what? This is the problem. Dean's an attorney, I believe, or at least he had got through the bar. What are you talking about? The word invasion has been coming up in political posturing. And this is the problem we're talking about. This is kind of why I want to do this. It was just because there's people that are just saying BS shit and they don't know, and then they rile everyone up. Next thing you know, they're buying, once again, we talked about this, Daily Wire chocolate bars against home invasion or something like that, or invasion of your country. Now, there is an invasion going on. I believe that's true. And so what do you do about this? And now is it, Dave and some of these have made comments. Oh my God, you should get Dean on this show. Isn't he Jewish? I don't think that. By the way, I'm an attorney myself. So why would I? And you just showed me, he said it's all about invasion. This is the public policy. And I get it. If that's the case, if you're talking about public policy, maybe he's saying, don't talk about, invasion. That's not the way you go about it for public. Okay, fine. But my point is about the legal issue and what Texas specifically did. And this is why I think they're doing great. Now, I'm going to go here. Let's get the Reason magazine. I'm doing pretty good for having actually had a little drink tonight too. Let's see. I'm going border on Control F. Politics created a border. Okay, that's not the one. Nope, that's not it. Death to Jordan. No. Border. No. What did they do with this article? I don't understand where it went. Reason magazine. What did you do here? But they were all up in arms about, I'm trying to remember what it was, but even the open borders libertarians, right? If someone is the federal government, think of this. We talked about immunity that you would have, and you talked about the 25 miles of the border. Think of these cases that we've seen. Spike Cohen, and I don't know, Spike maybe open or closed borders. I'm not bringing him as an example, but people talk about, I'm trying to remember, one of the guys for Reason has done this as well, where you have the the state government, just the police come in. Maybe it's the wrong house. They have a warrant to come into someone's house. Maybe it's the wrong house. I've seen that one example a few times. They destroy this person's business or this house, then they leave, and that person sues the state government for damages. And they're like, fuck you, deal with it. And a lot of times they are taken off on immunity. It's not a problem. And libertarians are up in arms about that, okay? Why? Well, because you just have this tyrannical government come in, destroy your property, not even giving you money for it, and you're just at a loss, and they maybe had the wrong place. That's what the state of Texas is pushing back against on the federal government specifically. Now, like I said, there's the ultra-virus, whatever you call it, conduct that they're going after, which I think in the APA violations, but these other two ones, they got the injunctions initially for it, for destruction of property and just being able to come across and by the way, the justification that the feds have said is we have preemption, or we have this ability to come within, to 25 miles of the border and to do what we want. And the court's like, hey, you don't get to come in there, even without a warrant. Matter of fact, it says you can't even come into dwellings without a warrant. You don't just get to come on someone's property and start destroying shit. That's not and by the way, this is private property. This isn't federal lands. So, oh my God, you should get Dean on the show. I'm okay. His girlfriend is Jewish. Okay. I don't know. And by the way, I don't really care. Maybe I'll have to listen to that episode, but it makes me cringe listening to people talk about, and by the way, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. So I would say a con law guy might come in and shred me a bit and maybe be a little bit, but I'm going to back off and say, look, all I'm doing is reading the pleadings, and I'm telling you specifically what this case is about, and to hopefully help you not go down the route where you're crying invasion or babies in cages. So now let's go back here. What did the Texas court say that the feds were doing? They were derelict in their duty. They were woefully unable to enforce their own things, and yet they were destroying property. So you see people that now say, Abbott says, put up more fencing. And they're like, oh my God, it's he's ignoring court orders. No, he's not, actually. The court orders just said the feds could do it. Never gave any orders for what Texas couldn't do it. So the feds aren't following the rule of law, their own statutes and their mandates that they're supposed to do, and then they get upset about it. So who's not actually following the rule of law? It's actually the feds here. All right. What am I, podcast review? I'm supposed to go listen to other people's podcasts? Fine. I'll go listen to it. Is it 10, 15 minutes, or do I have to see? And look, I used to like Ace. I just haven't heard him much. I always wanted him on my show. I never asked him. He's in my closing. He's in my closing here. Okay, I think that's enough rebel rouse tonight. Kill Pod. So if you guys want, I think I'm gonna take the stream link for the Kill Pod, and I'm just going to post it out in the ether, out in on Twitter, and we're just gonna see who comes in, because not enough people are signing up. Andy and I are gonna do it Friday at, what did we say, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. We got Zach Brown coming on as well. Should be exciting. So anyway, here's our legal thing. I hope you guys enjoyed this a little bit. I think, let me see if I'm missing anything else here. I'm going to once again, the filings here, and I'm going to type in the word private property. Yep, there it is. Finally, the court found that Texas would face irreparable injury, quote, in the form of loss of control and use of its private property. I mean, that's one reference to private property in there. Reason. Texas says another one in there. Border Patrol causes harm to private property, such as damaging fences, allowing livestock to escape, and they will often ex post restore a rancher by repairing the property or through financial compensation. That's a claim of the federal government, but that was found to be not true or disingenuous by the courts themselves. So what did he say in this one? Moreover, this is the feds are saying this. Moreover, given the greater potential for abuse, prevention of future possible exigencies rest on far more dubious grounds as a justification for destroying the use of private property than the need to address actual ongoing crisis. I mean, they just get waxed over and over here about private property, the possible harm suffered by the plaintiff in the form of loss and control of its use of private property continues to satisfy the irreparable harm prong of preliminary injunction analysis. Bam. In conclusion, accordingly, that's the order from the district court, what they said there. Okay. Is there a certain theme for this kill pod? Yes. I had said your favorite, your most blank of the year. Something, your best, your worst, your most annoying, which is me now talking about someone else's. That's what I do, though. I talk about podcasts. So I don't mind mentioning about TEDIC 84. Yeah, so that's the theme of the podcast. It's basically whatever of the year. And, people, look, if you're anonymous, maybe JC, maybe you're anonymous, you come on, you can have an avatar. Just, you got to let me know and join up here. There you go. Let's play a little Timcast going down Blindside. Tower Gang coming up on Wednesday. This should be a banger. It's going to be kind of a recap of the LP Georgia and their time down there. My wife said today, she goes, I don't think Toad actually has money, because if he did, he would have been able to afford shoes. All right, see you guys. See you next time.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. And I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast, I can't find it anywhere, and they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke, yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me,
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger.
Yeah, I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.